I appreciate you joining me today. We're going to be looking at the account of the Passover. Our hymn today is called the Passover.
Lord, as we take this solemn feast, from cruel bondage sweet release, thy Lamb's dear blood be upon heart's door, as we partake of our Passover.
The Lord is called our Passover in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and here as this hymn points towards the Lord's Supper and uses the same sort of figures of the Passover. Verse 2, may all who hope to go to heaven clear out their lives of wicked leaven, lest we forget the bitter past. Thy strength shall bring us home at last. Verse 3, will we be ready when God calls? Should we be lost when this world falls? With peace our feet are shod God's way, girded with truth hastening the day. Hopefully you're familiar with the Passover. If not, we're looking in Exodus chapter 12, verse 1. It was going to be the beginning of the Jewish calendar. Verse 2, this shall be the beginning, your beginning of months. It shall be the first of the month to you. They were told to take a lamb for a household. They were going to take it in on the 10th of the month. They were going to keep it until the 14th of the month, and then the lamb would be slaughtered. They were going to take the blood and put it on the doorposts as well as the lintel. Then they were going to roast the lamb in fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Most people think the bitter herbs, which this is what the hymn was pointing to, was to remind them of the bondage they had been in. They were going to eat the whole thing, and they were going to eat it in haste, ready to go with a belt on their waist, sandals on their feet, staff in their hand. It is the Lord's Passover. And of course you have what the term points to. I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. Notice verse 15, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. The Passover was part of the feast of unleavened bread. They were going to have a convocation on the first day and on the 7th day. So this is a week-long affair. And they were going to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. And so, as directions are given, verse 27, it is the Passover of the Lord who passed over the houses of children of Israel in Egypt. And we might just pause there as we think about this is the 10th plague. But we recognize that God is merciful. And that is the Passover. God will pass over. God is merciful. He's long-suffering. He doesn't want people to perish. That's why the Lord had given Pharaoh every opportunity to send the children of Israel away, but he hadn't done it. But the Lord is merciful. And as we think about Christ, our Passover, we recognize the mercy and the grace that are found in Jesus. In that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And the only way that we are not punished for our wickedness is in Jesus, and because of Jesus, and through Jesus, and to the glory of Jesus. The Lord is merciful in Jesus. If we will but come to Him, and again, back to the hymn, if you will, I believe one of the verses, thy lamb's dear blood be upon heart's door. You might consider that idea. The Lord is merciful. But the Lord also judges. He struck the Egyptians, and he struck them mightily. The firstborn, both man and beast. That earlier verse we read where the Lord says, I will judge their gods. And that's what happened. God does judge. And so when we read verses about the Lord separating the sheep from the goats, we recognize God's mercy, but we also recognize the Lord's judgment. When the Lord talks about everlasting life, he also talks about everlasting torment. So we have the Lord's grace, and we also have the Lord's judgment and condemnation. I understand all are judged, but all are not saved. And as we hasten that day, we know what's going to happen in that day. The Lord is going to say to the vast majority of people, depart from me, I never knew you. It is the broad path that leads to destruction. And we recognize that. And that's why we prepare ourselves, because we don't want the Lord to say that to us. And we're not trusting in our own works. We're trusting in him. But he says, my sheep hear my voice and they follow me. And so we follow him. God's grace that brings salvation has appeared to all men, Titus says, teaching us. And we respond to that teaching. That is a part of the Lord's grace, and that is how grace works. Now, back to our passage. What we have in the Passover, to look a little bit further down, notice verse 43 and further instructions. The Lord says to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat it. But every man's servant who is bought for money, when you have circumcised him, then he may eat it. A sojourner and a hired servant shall not eat it. You might notice, nor shall you break one of its bones, verse 46. You might think about that being messianic. Jesus, not one of his bones shall be broken. When a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. And then let him come near and keep it, and he shall be as a native of the land. It's talking about proselytes, if I can say it. For no uncircumcised person shall eat it. One law shall be for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you. Right? You have this focus on the covenant. And there's a covenant that we have today. The Lord says, right, this is the blood, this is my blood of the new covenant. And we honor that covenant, and we better honor that covenant. And we better not count the blood of that covenant as a common thing, Hebrews says. And so we remember Christ, our Passover. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.